Day 1378 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,175,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,110 in the past day. Then as for hardware, no tanks, 1 APV, 14 artillery, and a true bona fide Russian oil depot adding this latest account to the stats, plus 2 additional oil refinery strikes coming out of yesterday. Now to head to the map, where Russian telegram channels reported an overnight attack on the Akhmat Special Regiment in Chechnya, about 40 kilometers east of Grozny, which comes right after a strike on the Akhmat North military base in Grozny from just a few days ago. So this latest incident adds to the growing list of security challenges for Russian-backed forces in Chechnya, hinting at escalating resistance along this part of the Russian map. Then overnight in Russia's Oryol region, drones struck the Oralneft oil depot in the town of Livny, triggering a large fire at multiple storage tanks. Local residents posted video footage showing large flames, and the regional governor, Klishkov, confirmed the attack, stating emergency services are working on site. According to multiple sources, at least 2 storage tanks caught fire, and at this time, the operators of the Oralneft site have not released any public statements on the extent of structural damage or how the fire will affect regional fuel supply and logistics. And though this event comes not as an oil refinery hit, still, those numbers are in for November, as last month saw at least 14 drone strikes on oil refineries, the highest monthly total since the war began. And a figure that could have been even more impressive if the 2 of yesterday morning's strikes had flown on in just a few hours earlier, as the Ilsky oil refinery along with the Tuapse oil refinery and associated oil terminal in Tuapse, all within Krasnodar Krai, were targeted in drone attacks to commence the December string of strikes on Russian energy. And added to that, with the AFU not so shy to follow up with a second bout of aerial activity in the very same Tuapse district just earlier this morning. Then to head across to Moscow briefly, as a researcher's car at Moscow's Polis Institute exploded under mysterious circumstances. The 41-year-old quantum electronics specialist was not inside, luckily, for what could have been a targeted event, as Polis is known for military laser tech, and in fact is on the US and EU sanctions list. So this latest incident highlights ongoing attacks on Russia's military development, possibly signaling increased efforts to disrupt its defense technology. In fact, as part of these potential high-profile saboteur attacks, it was just 2 weeks ago Russian security services had claimed to have foiled a plot to target former defense minister Sergei Shoigu at a Moscow cemetery. The FSB said suspects placed a camera inside a flower vase to monitor his arrival before being detained, although no evidence was provided, and state media's shift in details were never confirmed. It's a familiar pattern that reinforces the Kremlin's domestic vigilance narrative, while expanding its security powers. Then to head down on the map, as Ukrainian special forces successfully struck a Shahed drone storage site in Shorter Cape of occupied Crimea. Using their latest FP2 drones overnight, the AFU targeted facilities housing fully assembled Iranian-made kamikaze drones in an operation designed to further disrupt Russian drone operations based in the peninsula. Interestingly, we were led to believe that the new FP2 drone was to have a maximum reported range of about 200 kilometers, but to get to this site, it takes a little bit longer than that. About 250 kilometers from closest AFU launching positions, and that, by the way, is in a straight line. So the range factor here could remind you of NATO weapon platforms, with manufacturers typically announcing a more conservative figure for weapons range, which, as you might guess, starkly opposes the Russian military philosophy of hyping up the capabilities of their weapons, and on more than the rare occasion, to the point that the flying unicorns don't even exist. Now to the main map, and starting with a different approach today, as Russian President Vladimir Putin announced yesterday that Russian forces had captured the Ukrainian cities of Pokrovsk in Donetsk and even Vovchansk in Kharkiv. The declaration was made following a briefing by General Gerasimov, head of the Russian General Staff, at a command post visit attended by Putin, wrapped up in his full military garb assortment, and the timing of these announcements coincides with a planned visit by a US delegation including Steve Witkoff, Witkov, now in Moscow for peace negotiations, signaling more upcoming potential geopolitical maneuvering by the Kremlin. But with Witkov having already met with Putin on 4 previous occasions, which has only resulted in the Kremlin reiterating its maximalist demands with no concessions, then fair to say, don't hold your breath for this latest Witkov-Moscow visit. Now, as for the Putin command post visit, the Kremlin leader also ordered the creation of a security zone along the Ukrainian border, specifically in Kharkiv, Sumy, and the Chernihiv regions, which is the latest approach that may signal Russia's ongoing efforts to cement control over northern Ukrainian border regions. However, the specifics of this security zone and the actual implementation remain unclear, with the creation of this security zone sounding a lot like 2025's rebranding of the previous year's Russian buffer zone initiative. Political spin. And now, with Putin's approval of the 2026 budget, with an almost 40% spending on war and security forces. So Putin can hardly stop the war that his economy is now built around. And to now look at various sectors of the main map, in light of Putin's supremely high confidence levels communicated, we turn to some of the latest realities in and around the Pokrovsk and Myrnograd fronts, where the areas remain contested, with Ukrainian forces still engaged in battles at these zones, and also seen for the Pokrovsk direction, warriors from the 429th Unmanned Aerial Systems Regiment destroying a Russian BTR-82 APV, which tried to attack Ukrainian positions under the cover of fog. Though it's not all sunshine and rainbows for the AFU defenses, as the enemy is accumulating through the fog into Myrnograd, trying to squeeze the city more into a ring. However, Ukrainian forces themselves speak on how the AFU works to detect and strike enemy logistics, with such movements not a sign of Myrnograd encirclement, at least not yet. Then up the map and to Kupiansk, a place where Russian military leadership reported the liberation of in late November, which can be quite difficult to wrap one's head around such a statement, as the situation on the ground speaks to a different story. At the moment, the city sector is significantly quieter than it was in early autumn. In fact, the map hasn't changed a great deal since then, since around mid-September time, which is consistent with how Ukrainian forces are also reporting generally less invader casualties now than previous weeks and months on this front. Instead, it's been a case of the Russians themselves having some difficulties filling back up their ranks after such heavy efforts over the past 3 months. Nonetheless, activity can just about always be seen, with, for example, Ukrainian military from the 14th and 30th Mechanized Brigades repelling a Russian attack on Kupiansk, picking off soldiers and their motorbikes via FPV. Russian forces control roughly 30% of the town after narrow infiltration tactics left their gains unstable. Small infantry pockets are operating by the city, but the area west of the Oskil River remains a grey zone of continuous engagements. Russian problems here are structural. Supplies must cross the Oskil River under constant Ukrainian drone surveillance. After establishing a bridgehead, they advance too narrowly, with too few reserves, spending the last few months managing only to consolidate a small number of streets, ultimately leading to not much in the way of map changes on this northern sector. Then to head north of here, where not much has changed, but to take a look for good reason, as the Putinist claims of capturing Vovchansk remain unsubstantiated. Ukraine still holds parts of the town, and it is interesting that Putin's making these claims that the Russian army has captured Vovchansk and other sites, which are claims that he could have more or less made 12 months ago. So that's how fast the needle is moving for the Russian army. The Western-facing propaganda, however, promoting the concepts of large swaths of unstoppable Russian gains, continues to move at the speed of light. Then to take a look around the map, and with some more drone-on-drone activity, through the lens of a Ukrainian hunter taking out a Russian waiter on supply roads, 3 in a row by the Omega unit in this latest release of Bullseyes. Then on the map, and as for the drones that are designed to live and breathe and operate on the ground, where it seems that the upcoming year of 2026 could very well just be shaping up to be the year of the unmanned ground vehicle, with more of the AFU's examples to show, whether it be performing soldier evac, MG fire support, or in this case, near the dangerous areas of the contact point, where ground robotic systems of the Alter Ego Battalion of the 93rd Kolodny Yar Brigade are also used to recover downed aerial drones. The video includes an episode where a robot equipped with forks and a net retrieves a damaged vampire drone. Cargo drones like these have a strong utility in this war, so even if a recovered drone of this caliber cannot be restored, its parts are used to repair other damaged vampires. Then to catch a first-person view or glimpse of a flying Russian drone, sort of, as intercepted video from a Russian FPV shows the moment when Ukrainian electronic warfare jam-in of its control frequencies succeeded, with front row seats to seeing this enemy FPV tumbling out of the sky, being the work of the EW unit of the 47th Mechanized Brigade, who's claimed 373 downed FPVs last month. Meanwhile on the map, the Freedom Battalion, part of Ukraine's National Guard, was excited to report destroying a Russian MTU-72 bridge layer armored vehicle. Adding to their growing list of targets, the bridge layer vehicle was discovered about to restore movement over a destroyed bridge to reopen a logistical route, but never completed the job. The MTU-72 is a 50-year-old Russian bridge layer we don't see much of in this war, and for good reason, with maybe less than 100 that are combat ready, leading to this very occasional, rare appearance in the field, and mainly due to a lack of modern replacements. Then to head across to the news, the European Union is drafting a fresh round of sanctions against the Lukashenko government, as Brussels accuses Minsk of hybrid balloon attacks. This comes as Lithuania is facing hybrid attacks with contraband balloons regularly launched from Belarus into its airspace. The forthcoming EU sanctions are expected to hit entities tied to Belarus's border and special operations services, institutions that, in practice, form part of Minsk's wider security apparatus supporting Russia's war effort. Belarus has already faced a high and growing number of EU sanctions since 2022, in part due to political repression internally, but also, especially, for its active support of Russia's war in Ukraine. The sanctions are broad, covering defense, dual-use goods, finance, trade, transport, and more, becoming part of a steadily tightening squeeze to remind Uncle Luka that sheltering Russia's war machine comes with a mounting economic toll. Then, speaking of economic tolls, to another Russian economy news segment to round out the video, taking this one rapid fire, as firstly, yet another apocalyptic earnings report out of Russia's largest oil company, with year-over-year earnings for the first 9 months of 2025 at energy giant Rosneft down a stunning 70%, with this company responsible for roughly 40% of all Russia's oil production. Those economic and kinetic sanctions are biting hard. Next up is the latest update of the volume of overdue mortgages in Russia, reaching 188 billion rubles, and it's an update to a graph that we've seen before. The chart shows Russia's mortgage overdue debt late by 90 days or more, which has risen sharply since 2023. The blue bars represent total overdue mortgage debt in billions, which still this month continues to look decidedly parabolic. Then to round out the video where everything must go for Russia, as the Bank of Russia and the Ministry of Finance have initiated significant sales of physical gold held in the National Wealth Fund to fill mounting budget shortfalls amid sanctions-era revenue pressures. The fund held approximately 405 tons of gold prior to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Since then, about 232 tons, roughly 57%, have been sold, leaving on the order of 173 tons as of latest November figures. For decades, Moscow built its gold stocks, now it's drawing them down. And the gold sales now raise questions about the durability of Russia's own rainy day buffer, and showing that the Kremlin is using its reserves to plug budget gaps rather than manage the ruble. And with that, the Kremlin's gilded safety net is quite literally being sold off by the piece, selling out their national wealth fund and Russia's future for a smoother fiscal quarter of a balance sheet, doing whatever they can to kick the can of collapse a bit further down the road. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for all the support. I do see it, notice it, and can't thank you enough. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!